And this was the Arabs' major water source. And there are 1 million Arabs that are now enslaved on the West Bank. Many Arab nations simply have too many billions in Jewish and New York banks, though, to turn on their bankers, the people who use them. There are only Gaddafi of Libya and Iran that really put their heart into fighting the West through various subversion and terrorism. And we can see their reasons if we look back in history, because their countries were looted by the elite bankers. And they consider we Westerners corrupt and unethical, or at least our leaders. And while Gaddafi may be rather ruthless, he does feel that he has a good motive for his actions. And little wonder that the Arabs are not all ruthlessly attacking the West, because actually the bankers used the oil-rich Arabs in a clever scheme in recent years to grab much of the world's mineral wealth. They got the price of oil tripled in 1973 on the condition that the Arabs deposit most of the money in their New York banks for 30 years. Well, the Arabs at the time weren't too sophisticated, and they were led down the garden path. And what happened was that the bankers loaned this money that they'd received from the Arabs out to the third world nations through separate fronts. So if the payments were defaulted and the money disappeared, the bankers would get off scot-free. And the elite got most third worlders who borrowed this money way in debt over their heads. And this gave them the opportunity to forgive the debts of the countries who were indebted if they would just sign away all of their mineral and oil rights. Well, many countries took the bait, and the rulers, though, like Marcos of the Philippines, who didn't, got deposed pretty quickly. Might add that the Mohammedans who follow Muhammad, shown here, do not have interest. They consider it usury. And of course, Moses and the early Christians taught that usury was wrong, and today, of course, we Christians are being used by the elite and their banking systems that brought in usury. Something to think about. And because of the bankers' action and what has taken place recently, in these 80s, as they come up, it appears the Arabs may suddenly start dumping their stocks and paper wealth on us at any time. And when the world finds that 90% of the Arabs' wealth has been squandered by the bankers who were supposed to be storing their money, when these bankers get tired of the bank's hold on them, well, we'll have big problems. And the Arab leaders will have to leave Arabia and the countries of the Mideast, and the people there will probably go back to being nomads like they were before for a short time. Unless the bankers come in, and of course the bankers will promise to save the day. And I'm sure the picture will be very easy to see. The bankers or elite will then come along with their new cashless exchange systems. They'll financially enslave the entire Western world if they get their way. And for a time then, the elite and their systems will probably rule the world with a heavy hand. And the third world people and dissenting freedom fighters will be exterminated by the millions. Well, now that you have a quick rundown on recent history and the factions that run the world behind the scenes, let's go one step further and try to plot our future. Well, thousands of prophecies have told of a coming tribulation when the world's population would be in great trouble. The great teachers explained that the end time was a time of choice, a time when we could either choose to follow the golden rule and the choice laws of the Creator, or to follow the dominion laws and try to exploit and use our neighbors and bail out of the whole situation. In a sense, then, our souls have needed all the chaotic experiences here on this earth to make a valid choice. And if we use and abuse others, our souls, that places us in a position where we can use and be abused. We learn this way. And these retribution laws are laws of karma, as the ancients called them. And eventually, some of us learn the error of dominion and domination tactics. And the people on this planet who carry the ancient souls of the ancient rulers are especially tempted and especially dangerous. And you see them at work today. And you see how very little has really changed on our planet. Outwardly, we may have the technology, but inwardly, we're still too often savages. And this lack of change and lack of ethics by the majority assures us of having more troubled times ahead. And in other presentations, I cover how humans can escape this through a mental balance action. I also have an expose of the upcoming polar shift or flood, which will probably foil the plans of the elite to bring... Well, as we've traveled through a little history, we've seen again how we're all influenced by the outward domination patterns of this world. Now let's go to a little deeper into what's in back these events and all this chaos. Now, we've seen that there's a spiritual war going on in one sense. The forces of reflection or domination are trying to set up a one-world system under the benevolent control of a few. And the forces of free choice and the so-called real are trying to hold the planet together while our souls learn the errors of dominion. And had there been no intelligences of choice with a great deal of power, our species would have destroyed ourselves many years ago. And an example of this over-control, as I call it, is in the 6-day wars of Israel. Remember, she was heading to Cairo with nuclear warheads when the entire army suddenly came to a halt for no known reason, just 60 miles from Cairo. And Golda Meir, the head of Israel, as you may remember, had so much mental trauma shortly after that she resigned. And to this day, military people are baffled as to what could cause this unexplainable phenomenon. Well, many times accidents have occurred that would have led to a nuclear holocaust if an overseeing hand had not interfered. Many times buttons have been pushed without success on this planet. Well, the strange truth is, we humans are allowed to destroy ourselves, but we're not allowed to endanger the planet. And to think our Creator would allow us to destroy our planet is arrogant imbecility. We're only given so much rope, and many times the domination leaders are themselves pawns in the game. Because somewhere in other dimensions and other worlds, there are people. There are identities and intelligences beyond ours who do care what happens to our planet. Well, that sounds like an interesting scenario, you might think, but think about it. MacArthur was going to use nuclear weapons to end the war in Korea, and Nixon himself was getting ready to use nuclear weapons in Vietnam, and both were stopped by actions of the elite or money changers, who were probably pawns in this little game. To be sure, the motives were probably monetary for the elite, but they were humanitarian for the overseeing free forces. And Nixon, as we pointed out, was removed, and he was framed by the elite who put him in office. And he saw communist missile silos being placed over Vietnam, and he started to get ready to flatten many major areas of the country to end the conflict. And a month later, he was in deep trouble over a minor incident that was repeated by most of the elite's front men regularly in Washington. And this is pointed out to show you the layers in truth and in reality in this world. Well, from a higher level of observation, we are all in a cosmic classroom gaining experience. And to take things at face value in this world is very foolish, because things are never what they appear to be in this material world of illusion here. When you see a Nixon being hung on the cross as a bad guy, you can almost believe that somewhere in there he's been a good guy to deserve his punishment here. The forces of evil or elite may run our planet from a superficial perspective, but choice laws and the forces of free choice ride at the master controls here. And since the time of the genetic alteration of our species, which we mentioned before, there has been a major group of volunteers who oversee our worldly affairs. They carefully monitor us in spacecraft that are awesome in size and ability. And in other productions, I go into more detail on this subject. Suffice to say here, hundreds of thousands of sightings of alien craft superior to ours should brighten this point a little. Well, according to avatars with knowledge in such areas, there are at least 3 million humans on our planet at any one time with what we could call an alien component in them. And while ordinary humans have a soul and several mind components, these star children, as they're sometimes called, have a non-material component of intelligence that directs their actions under special circumstances. And after years of staying in the usual human-like channels, some star children suddenly wake up to some mission in regard to uplifting humanity. And a person may be in public office and then suddenly strike out against the dominion system and actions of their superiors. And far from being mystical gurus on some mountaintop, they may be just led to write science fiction that shows the choice domination situation in a more youth-oriented way than the Bible does. Such persons often have a hard time surviving and fighting against a system with opposite goals to theirs. As peace marchers or reform advocates, they'll be a tiny minority And they'll often serve as examples and martyrs for the masses.